Good morning. My name is Mitch Landrieu. I'm the mayor of the city of New Orleans and the vice president of the United States Conference of Mayors, joined by Chief Manger, who represents the major city chiefs, with other mayors from across the country who will identify themselves when they have a chance to speak. We just completed a very cordial, productive, but aggressive meeting with the Attorney General. Yesterday, our same group met with top lawyers from the Department of Homeland Security to talk about ways to keep the streets of America safe. At the outset, let me say this, that cities across America are the hubs of innovation, entrepreneurship, the creation of jobs. Over 80% of the people in the United States live in our cities, and mayors and police chiefs' first responsibility is to protect the public health and the public safety of the citizens that live in our communities. We take it very seriously. We are the ones that are on the grounds at crime scenes. We are the ones that go to funerals when families are hurt. We are the ones that talk to and grieve with the officers' families when they have fallen as well. And so we don't take any job more seriously than making sure that the streets of America are protected from violent crime. We all have always enjoyed a robust relationship with the federal government, with the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, the U.S. Marshals, the U.S. Attorneys, in making sure that we protect the citizens from violent crime, irrespective of people's immigration status. So we wanted to communicate that to the Department of Homeland Security and to the Department of Justice to make sure they knew we wanted to be partners. This has obviously been a very difficult issue, trying to get focused and clarity, which we do not have at this point, between the White House, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of Justice. So most of our discussions have surrounded trying to find clarity about how we can better work together to stay focused on violent criminals, irrespective of their immigration status. We've had 2 meetings. They probably lasted in totality 3 or 4 hours. The lawyers continue to meet so that we can get on the same page, because that is what's going to be in the best interest of the people of the United States of America. So with that, I want to turn it over to Chief Manger, and then other mayors will follow. They'll introduce themselves, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief Tom Manger, Montgomery County Police Department, Montgomery County, Maryland. I'm also the president of the Major City Chiefs Association. It's an association of the largest police departments in the United States. This was, I think, a very productive meeting. The Major City Chiefs Association, along with the Conference of Mayors, have met a number of times with the AG and his staff. And there's a lot of areas that we are in agreement that we look forward to working together on. Today we focused on some of those issues where we needed more discussion. Issues where we're not sure what the expectations of the federal government are, specifically with regard to issues surrounding immigration and the working together between local police departments and our federal law enforcement agencies. I thought it was a good discussion today. We really, I think, narrowed down the issues where we do need clarity, the issues where we may still have where we may still be somewhat apart on how we're approaching specific issues like detainers, civil detainers that are filed in our jails. Do localities have the authority to honor those detainers? And this is, as I told the Attorney General, this is not a political decision, this is a legal decision. Do we have the legal authority to hold someone based on these detainers? There isn't clarity on that. We had a great discussion. I think and he promised, the Attorney General promised, that those discussions would continue. Our attorneys are going to continue to exchange information, and we're hopeful, based on some of the information that they provided us, that we are going to be able to find common ground here sometime in the future. So we really did talk very specifically about some of the issues that were of concern to localities, our local cities in this country, and I was very encouraged by the conversation, and I'm pleased with the fact that the Attorney General is willing to continue this conversation until we do get to a point where we do have the clarity that we've asked for.
Thank you, Chief. Steve.
I'm Steve Benjamin, the mayor of Columbia, South Carolina, and second vice president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. We're thankful today that we had a very productive and aggressive conversation with the Attorney General as we advocate not only on behalf of our citizens, but on behalf of the men and women in uniform in our cities who run towards danger every single day. Not just in my current role, but in the past life as director of our state's second largest law enforcement agency, we have always prioritized public safety and making sure that we're working to make sure we keep the streets of America safe. What we asked the Attorney General for today is for him and his team to work with the Department of Homeland Security, to work with the White House. In the absence of clear, comprehensive immigration reform, to be able to give the people of the country clear, consistent clarity in terms of constitutional and statutory authority as to how, in fact, we're supposed to enforce the laws of the land. The conversation was productive. It was frank, and we appreciate that. And we look forward to continued discussion on behalf of all the mayors all across this country. Thank you.
Steve. Go ahead, you go next.
Steve Adler. I'm the mayor of Austin, Texas. I thought the meetings were really helpful. Not only the meeting we had today with the Attorney General, but yesterday afternoon we had the opportunity to meet with folks in the Department of Homeland Security, including the acting director of the Immigration Custom Enforcement, or ICE. I would reiterate what my colleagues have said, that it is the city's first priority to ensure that there's public safety, and we want to do everything we can to get that done. We don't want to do anything that interferes or impedes the federal government's fulfilling its responsibilities under federal law, federal immigration statutes. But at the same time, our police don't have the resources or the time to act as federal immigration agents any more than they have the resources or the time to act as tax agents or game wardens or anything else that's not part of their job to keep our communities safe. And it's the interplay between those two that creates difficulties in cities. Because to the degree that the people in the community see their law enforcement acting or perceived as acting as federal immigration agents, it erodes the trust that, quite frankly, cities like Austin have spent a lot of time and a lot of money developing. It's one of the reasons why Austin's one of the safest large cities in the country. I was real pleased both yesterday and today with the specificity we discussed those issues. With respect to specific interpretations of 8 U.S.C. 1373, interpretations of the President's executive order where he talks about a city that could be sanctioned as being a city that also impedes or hinders the enforcement of law, which seemed like an awfully undefined and large catch-all statement. Real pleased to hear both yesterday and today that it's a position of the federal government that latter provision only goes to interpreting enforcement actions with respect to 8 U.S.C. 1373. But beyond that, talking about those areas and things we can do to help ensure that local police are not being perceived as being federal immigration agents, as well as discussing what the priorities are of the federal government as they seek to go after serious criminals. We talked about the folks that are being caught in those raids or those sweeps that are not suspected of any criminal violation at all, the impact that has in communities, and ways that as a matter of practice we might be able to minimize the impact that those kinds of policies have on maintaining trust relationships in our communities. So I was real pleased with that. I was real pleased that both at the meeting yesterday as well as the meeting today, we were specifically asked to follow up, and I think we'll be doing that immediately to flesh out some more of the specifics that we were able to discuss.
Thank you.
Mayor Jorge Elorza from the city of Providence, Rhode Island. I think that we had a productive conversation today. You know, the first principle was we're all mayors. We're very practical, we're mission driven, and we let it be known that our main priority is to make sure that we're focusing our scarce public safety resources on serious criminals in our communities. And we're going to bristle, and we're certainly going to resist any suggestion that we transfer or shift those resources and that focus to folks that forgot to put a turn signal on, or perhaps didn't fully stop at a stop sign. The point that we wanted to hammer home on and focus on is that there are points of common interest here. Just as we want to focus on those public safety threats, those serious criminals, that's the same goal that the federal government has. So how can we come together and work together to make sure that we're focused on those folks? We're hearing from many cities throughout the United States that right now folks are immigrants and Latinos are less likely to report a crime if they're a victim, or less likely to step up as witnesses if they witness a crime because of the fear or deportation. And this goes for folks who might be here undocumented and illegally, or folks who might be legal residents and actually even citizens. And so we want to make sure that whatever steps are being taken at the federal level, that they understand the impact that they're going to have in our home communities. And we're going to continue to push back on any suggestion that we de-emphasize or deprioritize those serious criminals in our community. So I thought it was a productive conversation because we agree on that main priority, but we're going to continue to hammer home on the specifics of the policies and of the issues and get clarity on where we stand, on where we don't stand, on where DOJ stands and where DOJ doesn't stand, to figure out how we can always focus on those serious criminals, which is all of our priority to focus on.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Karen Wilson-Freeman.
Good morning. Karen Freeman Wilson, Mayor of the City of Gary. I too thought it was a great meeting. The 2 points that I would like to emphasize, in addition to our conclusion that we are all, as mayors, as representatives of the federal government, interested in having very safe cities, as mayors, we are interested in compliance with federal law. And we wanted to emphasize that both with the Department of Homeland Security representatives yesterday and with the Attorney General today. In addition to that, we hold dear as mayors, both from a legal perspective, many of us are lawyers, but also from a constitutional perspective, the right that all persons have to be protected by the Fourth Amendment. And not only do we not want to get sued, but we think it is the right thing to do to ensure that they are in fact protected. And so we emphasize that to DHS staff yesterday, we emphasize that to the Attorney General today, and to the extent that this is a first step and part of a continuing conversation, I have every belief that we will all reach a common ground.
All right, thank you. We're also joined by Tom Cochran, who's the CEO of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Tom, you all right? Okay. I would just end with this, and then we'll open it up to questions. First of all, none of this discussion would be necessary if Congress and the President would enact comprehensive immigration reform, which is long overdue in the United States of America, and we hope Congress gets to work and does that sooner rather than later. In the meantime, the mayors of America will continue to do what is necessary to keep our streets safe, consistent with the provisions of the Constitution of the United States of America. All right, why don't you go ahead and ask questions? You can just, if you want to ask any specific person, do that, or I'll try. Go ahead.
My question's for you, actually. So this is the first time, was this the first time that you've had a chance to talk to the Attorney General since your city received a letter threatening to pull back funds?
Well, my city, as you know, is under 2 consent decrees right now. One for the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office, which is a separate legal entity from the City of New Orleans, and one from the Police Department. So my city has been in almost daily communication with the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice in the Obama administration and in the Sessions administration. So we were very surprised to receive that letter, since members of DHS and DOJ from the last administration actually helped craft the consent decree. So almost by definition, it's hard to understand how we would be out of compliance. We actually filed a declaratory action in federal court to allow the judge to opine about that. We also submitted to the Attorney General today our compliance letter, which reiterated once again, after having done so many other times, that we are in compliance with 1373. Interestingly enough, I think the mayors learned a lot yesterday and today about how, if we narrow these issues and we get clarity, we can all get on the same page. For example, yesterday, DHS reiterated again their priority enforcement program, that they do not expect local law enforcement to be part of the civil deportation force, that they are not doing sweeps in sensitive areas, and they define sensitive areas in an April 2nd a memo as churches, schools, and playgrounds, and hospitals, and funerals and weddings. and that they're going to focus their attention on violent criminals, to which we said, well, great, where you been? We've been looking to do that for a very, very long period of time. And by the way, you might want to take a look at the funding reductions that are in the president's budget for Homeland Security grants and COP grants, and the kinds of tools that we use to create partnerships between us and the federal government, which, by the way, are very robust. So, for example, in New Orleans, and I know other mayors have these examples, we have something called the Multi-Agency Gang Unit. We partner with the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, the U.S. Marshal, the U.S. attorneys to actually go after gang members. We've actually arrested, prosecuted, and put in jail for very long periods of time some very bad guys, over 150 of them. We want to keep doing that. What the mayors are saying is if you pull our focus off of that and pull us into civil compliance with your ISOs, we're not going to be able to protect the streets the way that we want to. And so if we want to be focused on violent crime, let's focus on that, and then give us clarity about what you think a sanctuary city is, which we don't have now. Yes?
Just if I can ask just a quick roundup, what the policies are for your local law enforcement when there's an arrest. Are they allowed to ask immigration status?
As far as I know, for all of the jurisdictions here, and mayors, correct me if I'm wrong, if you're arrested in the city of New Orleans, you get fingerprinted, and that fingerprint goes to ICE right away. We did that 80,000 times last year, and ICE gets notification immediately about whether we're in possession of an individual that is in violation of the civil immigration laws. The question then gets to be constitutionally how long we can hold that individual without probable cause or without a warrant. That is a specific area of concern that we are working on to avoid civil liability and to make sure that we're in compliance with the 4th, the 5th, and the 14th Amendments of the Constitution. And that's just an issue that we're going to have to work through that lacks clarity right now, I must say, between DHS and DOJ. So we're looking forward to them getting together, getting on the same page, and then communicating that to us as well.
Did any of you raise, either here or at the DHS meeting, this issue of federal enforcement at or around courthouses? As you mentioned, that there's concern about witnesses, and why would someone come testify at a trial if they think they're going to be picked up?
Well, again, I'll address it generally, then I'm going to ask Mayor Adler from Austin to address it specifically because he was engaged most acutely in those discussions. One of the things that you're hearing from police chiefs and mayors who are boots on the ground, that Secretary Kelly confirmed is a smart thing to listen to, is that when you do things like you suggested, it actually drives people back into the shadows and increases crime because people will not come testify. I can't stress enough that all of our police departments have been working on community police relations so that in domestic violence issues or someone was a victim of rape, if you go there and the first thing you ask them is not how you're doing, but what's your immigration status, they're less likely to call you. And there's demonstrable evidence now that the reporting has diminished significantly in places across the country. But Mayor Adler spoke to that issue, and I'll have him address it specifically.
I don't think that it's terribly clear or definitive on that issue. The acting director of ICE said that it was not the policy of ICE to conduct sweeps or raids, not his terms because he didn't like using either of those terms, but said that it was their policy not to pick up people in courthouses or in courtrooms unless it was their only opportunity to get somebody who was a very serious criminal threat. We don't have a lot of definition as to what how that would get applied.
Mayor, have you gotten an actual definition from this administration as to what they consider a sanctuary city to be?
I think that in the discussions we had, they referred us all to the filing in the Richmond case about 2 weeks ago that defined a sanctuary city, a city that was sanctionable, meaning could be denied the grant funding from DOJ, as a city that violates 8 U.S.C. 1373. And that was the full extent of the definition. As I said earlier, the President's executive order also gave discretion to Homeland Security and the Attorney General to identify as a sanctionable city, a city that impeded or hindered the enforcement of federal immigration law. And what we were told both yesterday and today was that clause would be used to interpret whether or not someone was violating the communications statute that is 8 U.S.C. 1383.
They left
which
it open and broad. Is that in any way hindering the federal government?
No. I think that it was a limitation on the scope of what would be a sanctionable or a sanctuary city, because it had to violate 1373. So, for example, non-compliance with the voluntary warrantless criminal warrantless detainer program does not constitute a violation of 8 U.S.C. 1383 and would not be a sanctionable issue. So what we were hearing both yesterday and today was a narrowing of what might be involved in a sanctuary city or a violative city than what a lot of us feared it might be coming into town yesterday.
But there's not a lot of, excuse me one second, but there's not a lot of clarity in writing about that issue. But to add on to that, but we don't have that in writing, and there's not a lot of clarity, and there's some inconsistency between the lawyers at DHS and DOJ. So we're hoping.
And based on what you heard, there are no cities in the country that you know.
And again, with Mayor Benjamin, based on what I've heard, I don't know of any cities in the country that are out of compliance with that at the moment.
Mayor Landrieu,
Yes.
The Attorney General seems to suggest that police consent decrees have made cities more dangerous. Do you believe that's the case in New Orleans? Or is that something you...
No, I don't think so. I think it is important for the federal government to make sure that police departments are policing constitutionally. I think there's a legitimate argument to be had about whether consent decrees ought to be the first order of business, ought to be the last resort, and whether or not they're too broad and they're too narrow. But I don't think anybody can look at some of the things that have happened across the country and say that there's not a need for it. Now, let me caution to say, as we have always said, 99% of the police officers in this country go to work every day, put their lives on the line, and do the right thing. But there have been examples that have demonstrated that some officers are poorly hired, poorly trained, poorly supervised, and sometimes patterns and practices develop that need to be fixed. So the mayors of America want to talk to the Department of Justice and EPA and all kinds of things about when the federal government comes in, when they go out, the right balance for those kinds of things. It's not fair to say, though, that the city of New Orleans is less safe because of consent decrees. I think we've been working through that. We've been in it for 7 years. We've turned our police department around, and then some other departments have done that. As if there are other mechanisms to do that are short of a consent decree, I think that you can work on those kinds of issues as well, and that warrants further discussion.
You mentioned that there was an aggressive part in these discussions. What was the most aggressive part?
Well, when you get a bunch of lawyers in the room and you open it up, it can get kind of aggressive. We all kind of learned the Socratic method in law school. It's a little hard to have the Attorney General cross-examining you or him, but we just had discussions about, we'll talk about what you mean by detainer. Tell me what it means to violate 1373. I don't understand what it is that you're saying. What's the difference between political rhetoric and legal language? It was a good, robust, very substantive argument that good lawyers have with each other that we need in order to get clarity and not overreach. And so we welcome that. We think that we can be hard on the problem and soft on the people. Maybe Congress could learn a little bit from us, but it was a really good, robust meeting that I think is going to produce, hopefully, some good results or at least some clarity.
Mayor, was there any discussion about programs geared towards strengthening relationships between community police departments and communities like the cops?
We talked about, all of the mayors reminded the Attorney General that those programs have been very helpful in the past, and we hope that this argument that we're having now doesn't threaten our ability to do that in the future, because we all have attested to the efficacy of those funding sources, which, by the way, since 1996 have been cut by about 80%. And that's unfortunate, because we actually know how to reduce violent crime in America, and it's more boots on the ground, it's better training, it's better technology, it's an investment in mental health and substance abuse, it's making sure that we actually do weed and seed and things that actually work on the front end and on the back end. We reduced crime by half in America at one point in time. We can do it again with the right resources, but we can't do it if they're retrenching on Homeland Security grants, retrenching on cops grants, or taking the position that local law enforcement, is left to the locals. I would just reiterate again, as you have seen across America in the last couple of years, local law enforcement is the tip of the spear. They're the first ones on the ground when there's a terrorist attack, when there's a Homeland Security threat, whether it's a natural disaster or a man-made disaster, or whether it's public safety. It's our guys and gals that are out there first, our emergency responders that are out there first, our Homeland Security, and we always want our federal partners on the ground. And the more people we have protecting the people of America, the safer that they're going to be.
Well, again, so part of the clarity that we got from today's conversation is what exactly is a sanctuary city. And what we got was that it means if you're not in compliance with Section 1373, if that's the definition of sanctuary city, then I don't think there are any sanctuary cities in the United States of America. And so that's what's important from this conversation. And what's been so unfortunate about the debate, if you can call it that, up to this point, is that we're using the same term, but it's like we're speaking different languages. Without that clarity and without a set definition of what sanctuary city is, then you just can't have a conversation. So we ask for more clarity. In terms of the percent of our budget that comes from the federal government, it's total at about 10% of our budget, $70 million. But I've consulted with lawyers locally and also lawyers nationally. The amount that is actually at risk is close to zero.
All right, you guys. Thank you all so much. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
So again, like most cities, if not all cities, we're not in violation of 8 U.S.C. 1373. So I don't think that we're susceptible to that. We do receive about $50 million annually, which is about 5% of our budget, from federal grants. But I understand that even if we were determined to be in violation of 1373, only a small portion of that would actually be put in play. But based on the conversations we've had last night and today, I don't think that Austin or Travis County qualify as a sanctionable city.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you all.